Hey everyone, it's Mr. Aarons here. We're going to be diving into another lesson today, talking about fractions, decimals, and percents, something that we've looked at before. We're going to look at a few different ways to move between them from different perspectives. All right. So this is lesson 6-4. Again, we're talking about fractions, decimals, and percents. The first thing I have for you is vocab. We got our definition of percent, and that is a ratio that compares a number to 100. Okay, so we know our ratios are going to look something like A over B, or A to B, or A colon B. Those are all the different ways that our ratios can work. So basically, we're going to have a ratio that compares a number to 100. So 100 is always going to be part of it when we're looking at these decimals. You can write that fraction. You can write it as a fraction. So using this method with a denominator of 100, and you'll see some examples of that right now. So basically, all of these steps to move to and from all of these have a few simple directions. Our first one, we're talking about writing percentages as fractions. So a lot of times when we give you a percentage like this, all you're going to have to do is write that as a fraction. And there's a really quick two-step method to do this. The first one is to write with the denominator of 100. So let's take a look at my first one here. I have 5%. I'm going to write this as 5 out of 100. When we're talking about percentages, they can be anywhere from 0 to 100. They can even go over 100. But for the most part, you're going to be dealing with 0 to 100. But as you can see on my next example, we will have some that are going to be a little different. So basically, all you have to do is you have to remember every time you have a percentage, it's out of 100, even if it is more than 100. So your 100 is going to be your denominator always, denominator of 100. So we write it with a denominator of 100. And our last step there is just simplify, write as a mixed number. So that's what we're going to do right here. I know that both of these can be divided by 5, so we're going to do that. And that'll get me to 1 on top and 20 on bottom. And I have just written that percentage as a fraction. Let's try our next one here. We have 125%. I'm going to write as a fraction. Make sure to put 100 as the denominator of 100. From there, all we have to do is simplify. I can see that these both can be divided by 25. And we'll get 5 on top, 4 on bottom. And our last step, move that to a mixed number, 1 full fraction with 1/4 left over. Nice and easy. As you can tell, this shouldn't be too tough for you. Something that we've seen before. 72 here, I'm going to write that as 72 over 100. I can see that these both can be divided by 2. Can 74 be divided by 4, though? Yes, it can. 74 and 100 can both be divided by 4. This is 18 out of 25. And that's basically all you're going to do. For writing those percents as fractions, all you're going to do is you're going to write a denominator of 100 and simplify. Nice, easy two-step method there. We got another two-step method for you. We're now talking about writing percents as decimals. So we just wrote some percents as fractions. Now let's do them as decimals. Another two-step method. All you have to do is you have to move that decimal point 2 times. Why is that, you're asking? Well, our percents are out of 0 from 100. But we know our decimals are usually going to be like 0.21. This would be the same as if I said 21 100ths. So if I would write this as a fraction, it would be 21 over 100. But when we're writing percents, we want our numbers to represent this right here, 21 out of 100 or 21%. So let me show you how to do this. There's 2 steps to it. All you have to know what to do is move your decimal point 2 spots to the left. So let's watch with this 1.5%. It's 1.5%. We're going to move that decimal 1 time right here and another time right here. We're going to have to add in a 0. Oh, I am moving the wrong way, though. Look at that. I just moved right. Scratch that. Mr. Aaron's mistake. 2 spots to the right. Now we're going to toss in a 0 right there, and our decimal point goes right there. 0.015. That would be our decimal of that. If we were to write this as a fraction, I would read this out loud, and it would say 100 or 15 thousandths. We got our tenths, hundredths, thousandths. 1.5%. So basically your two steps there are just to move your decimal point 2 spots to the left. Let's try again with 30 here. We got 30%. Our decimal point is currently right here. We're going to move that once, remove that twice to right here. And that gives us a decimal of 0.3. We could read that aloud as 3/10, which is the same as 30/100, which makes sense to why that is 30%. So again, a two-step method for this. When you're writing your percents as decimals, two-step method, move decimal point 2 spots, and that's all. It's really just a one-step method. I just threw in that's all in the end. Let's do 62.5. 62.5%. We're going to move that decimal once. We're going to move it twice to the left, and we get 0.625. I could write that as 625 out of 1,000. And if we move those decimal places both once, we would see it's out of 100, which makes sense for our decimal here. Okay. So we just wrote our percents as decimals. Now we're going to write our decimals as a percent. We're doing the same thing. Look at this. When we're writing our percents as decimals, we moved 2 spots to the left. Now we are moving our decimal point 2 spots to the right. So we already have them as decimals. Basically, we're just undoing what we just did, turning them back into percents. We're going to move 2 spots to the right here. Let's look at our first one. 1, 2, decimal point right there. We got 33.3%, which makes sense. If 100% is our whole, 100% would equal 1. And we have a third of 1 right now. So we have 33.3%. Our next one, let's move that spot twice, move it once, move it twice. We have to add in that 0, and we got to 40%. Another one, let's move it once, let's move it twice, put it right there. We got to 2.3%. And again, move it once, move it twice. We got to 175%. If you need these two rules, jot them down quickly. Writing percents, you should really just need one step there. Writing decimals as a percent, one step there. Notice that they're the same thing. We're just undoing each other here. We're moving back and forth between writing a percent as a decimal and writing a decimal as a percent. This is the toughest one right here. Those other ones are all one step. This one takes a few more than one. Writing a fraction as a percent. I've got a 3-step method for us here if you want to stop and jot these down. Step 1 is to first write as a fraction. That's the biggest key there. After there, you're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. This is that long division method. I'm going to write that right here, long division. This is that long division method that we worked on a few weeks back. And finally, write that percent by moving the decimal spot 2 points to the right. We're moving that decimal to a percent. If I look back on here, decimal to a percent, move 2 spots to the right. Let's do it. It tells us 5 out of 16 families in the U.S. own dogs. What percent is this? Start by writing this as a fraction. That's my first step. Write as a fraction. Check. Number 2, divide the numerator by the denominator. All right, this is when we turn this into a long division. And here's where I remember to put in all those extra zeros just in case we need them. Now 16 doesn't go into 5, so we got a 0 to start. 16 does go into 50. It goes in 3 times as 48. As we subtract that out, we carry down a 2, carry down a 0, and 16 goes into 20 one time as 16. And pull down a 4, pull down another 0. Looks like we might even need some more zeros. 16 goes into 40 2 times. Oops. As I should write this 2 up here. 2 times as oh, excuse me. Well, I missed something here. Went in 1 time. Went in 3 times as 48 and 1 time. Okay, now we're sitting good. Perfect. And right here, I should have 16 going in twice. That's 32. Subtract that out. We get an 8 left behind. Carry down to 0. We're to 80. How many times does 16 go into 80? It's going to go in, I think, 5 times. 5 times perfectly as 80. And we get 0 left behind, so we know we are done. So we got our decimal right here. We finished our second step. And our last step, write as a percentage by moving the decimal point 2 spots to the right. So I'm going to do that. 1, 2, and I get to 31.25%. And I could check this right now by punching this in here. We could do 5 divided by 16. And we got our decimal there. If I were to turn that into percent, that's really just me timesing that by 100. And we get our answer there. That's another way to think about this. Once you get that decimal, we're really just timesing it by 100 to make it a percentage. We got another one here. 3 out of 11 families have cats. Let's set it up, start as a fraction, and then move on to our long division. Remember, our top number always goes on the inside. I don't know how many zeros we're going to need. 11 goes into 3 0 times, goes into 30 2 times as 22. Subtract that out. We got 8 left behind. Doesn't go into 8, pull down to 0. 11 goes into 87 times as 77. Subtract that out. We got 3, pull down to 0. 11 goes into 30 2 times as 22. We got 8 left behind, pull down to 0. Goes in there 7 times at 77. Leaves behind a 3. Pull down to 0. We need more zeros. And we're going to notice something right here. I'm noticing a pattern that's going to keep going. So I know I'm going to have 0.2727. This is just going to continue to repeat. So here's what I'm going to do right here. I'm going to take my decimal point and move it once, move it twice, and I'm going to get 27.27 repeating percent. I followed all those same steps, wrote as a fraction, divided the numerator by the denominator, set that up right here with that long division, and finally move that decimal point. And I can check my work right now, 3 divided by 11, and I see that, multiply that by 100, and perfect. Last one here, we got 8/12. They already set it up as a fraction for us. Move that into long division. And 12 goes into 8 0 times. It goes into 80. I think 6 times at 72. Pull down another 8. 0 goes in 6 times at 72. Pull down an 8, pull down a 0, goes in 6 times, and you're going to notice this is going to keep going. So I can write this as 0.666. Forever it would go. Move that decimal point 2 places or multiply by 100. And we get to 66.6 repeating percent. So you got a little bit of examples with some repeatings, some without. Follow those 3 steps. Again, if you need to take any pictures of anything on this side, so I can do that right now. Otherwise, this is kind of our intro to tomorrow's lesson where we're going to be looking at proportions and percentages and comparing them like we have before using those cross products. All right, good luck with this.